to the one who betrays him to death, friend, do what you have to. He calls Judas friend. And I told the other night, didn't I, the story of the girl who said to her teacher in class, when the teacher said, what do you think happened to Jesus between Good Friday when he died on the cross and Easter Day when he rose from the dead? Please, miss, I think that Jesus was in the darkest part of hell looking for his friend Judas. His friend Judas. There's nowhere where Jesus will not go for his friend, even though his friend betrays him to death. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, they have a very important day. In our church in the West, we make a lot of fuss on Maundy Thursday, the Last Supper and all that. We make a lot of fuss on Good Friday, the crucifixion. We make a lot of fuss on Easter Day, the resurrection, but we don't do much on Saturday. That's for cleaning the church and doing the flowers. In the Eastern Church, it's called the Great Saturday, because it is the day, they believe, when hell was harrowed, when hell was conquered. Sin and death and hell shall never o'er us final triumph gain. God is love, so love forever o'er the universe must reign. My hell has been conquered. I often don't realize it, and I still wallow in it. But it's been done. My sins have been forgiven. I don't always appreciate that. But there's nothing I can do about it. Whether I confess my sins or not, they have already been forgiven. They have already been forgiven. But we don't always realize it. And in a way, we sometimes live in like the tomb, waiting for someone to move the stone away from our hearts, so that we can really know deep down in our hearts that we are forgiven, that we have a friend. What a friend we have in Jesus. Jesus can move that stone away and does. When? I don't know. There's a lovely story about the man who was going through the woods and he saw a chrysalis of a butterfly on a tree, and it was beginning to crack open and a butterfly to appear, and he'd never seen this happen before, so he stopped and he watched it very, very gently begin to crack open, slowly begin to open up. The prison, the tomb, slowly begin to open up. And he watched it for a long time, but then he thought, I think I'll help it a bit to happen a bit quicker. And he took the chrysalis down from the tree and he placed it in his hand, and incredibly gently he just breathed warm air on it. And surely enough, it opened more quickly, and out came a beautiful butterfly and fluttered on his hand and died. Timing is everything. God's time is perfect. I wish I was holier. I wish I knew God better than I do. Timing is everything. I long for healing. Timing is everything. The extent of God's love goes to rescue Judas in hell. The extent of God's love. One of my very favourite stories is the story of a 7-year-old boy called Richard. And Richard apparently was an only child, and his parents moved house and he went to a new school. And his parents were a little bit apprehensive, how well he would settle in the new school. But he was an outgoing lad, and within a couple of days he came home. And he brought a couple of lads with him from school, and they played, and that was fine. And this went on for 2 or 3 days, and then he stopped bringing any children home from school, any friends. And his dad said to him, he said, "Richard, what's the matter? Why don't you bring these children home from school anymore?" And Richard didn't say anything. And he said, "Come on, Richard, you can tell me." He said to me, "Is it your mother?" And Richard said, "Well, yes, it is my mother." Because you see, Richard's mother had monstrous hands, completely deformed, crippled like claws. They were awful to look at. And the little boy didn't want his friends to see these awful hands. So his dad told him, he said, "You know, when I met your mummy many years ago," he said, "she had very beautiful hands. She worked in the makeup department in a big store in town, and she needed to have beautiful manicured hands. Anyway, we met and we fell in love, we got married, and you came along, and when you were a little toddler," she said, "one day your mummy was in the kitchen and she heard this awful scream. And she ran into the living room, and you'd fallen on the fire. And she ran up to you and grabbed you off the fire and put the fire out, and you were all right. You know, you were all right. We took you to the hospital, but you've been fine. But your mummy's hands were destroyed." And the following day, little Richard came home from school, and he brought a couple of friends with him. And he said, "You must look at my mummy's hands." He said, "They show how much she loves me. You must look at my mummy's hands. They show how much she loves me." I was talking to someone yesterday at church mice who was a sign interpreter. And you know what the sign is for Jesus in sign language? Nails. Nails. "Crown him the Lord of love. Behold his hands and side, rich wounds, yet visible above, in beauty glorified." They show how much he loves me, the extent of the love of God in Jesus. And one other thing to say about the love of God in Jesus and its costliness. I brought here, you won't be able to see it from the back, an icon, but do afterwards come and have a look at it. It's from Mount Athos, and it's a picture. That's the actual size of the original icon, and it's a picture of Jesus having been taken down from the cross, being buried by his mother. And it is an incredibly moving icon when you get close up. The closeness of mother and son. The agony on her face. Because no parent should ever have to bury a child. When she was 15, she said yes to God. When she was 15, she didn't know what she was letting herself in for. Someone said to her fairly early on, "A sword shall pierce your own heart," and by gum it did. When she saw her child leave home, when she saw him arrested and persecuted, and when she saw him on a cross, and then when she buried him. The consequence of saying yes to God. The price. And in the lesson we had tonight, in the first part of the lesson, we have another yes. The yes of Jesus. Jesus doesn't want to die. He prays to the Father that the Father will take this cup from me. Nevertheless, he says, "Not my will, but thy will be done." Thy will be done. The consequence of him saying yes to his Father is the cross and the tomb. I read a beautiful article about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane by a monk, from Mount Athos, a Greek monk. And he said simply, the purpose of the Christian life is to come to Gethsemane. The purpose of the Christian life is to come to Gethsemane and just say those words, thy will be done. Thy will be done. That's the purpose of our mission. One more step. To say or whisper, thy will be done, whatever that is. It's the cost of discipleship. God's love for us. If you do not love, you will die. If you do, you will be crucified. I want to finish with a poem. This is a poem that came, it's a short poem, that came out of the First World War, when so many people lost their faith and so many people died, millions of people. We've never really recovered. There isn't a family in the land that wasn't and isn't affected by the First World War. And out of that First World War came some poets, and one of them wrote about the death of Jesus in this way. He was called Edward Shillito, and the poem is Jesus of the Scars. And it goes like this. If we have never sought, we seek thee now. Thine eyes burn through the dark, our only stars. We must have sight of thorn pricks on thy brow. We must have thee, O Jesus of the Scars. The heavens frighten us, they are too calm. In all the universe we have no place. Our wounds are hurting us. Where is the balm? Lord Jesus, by thy scars we claim thy grace. If when the doors are shut, thou draw us near, only reveal those hands, that side of thine. We know today what wounds are. Have no fear. Show us thy scars. We know the countersign. And this is just the last verse is so wonderful. The other gods were strong, but thou wast weak. They rode, but thou didst stumble to a throne. Yet to our wounds, only God's wounds can speak. And not a God has wounds, but thou alone. This icon, in all its sorrow, in all its love, in all its sadness, in the Orthodox Church has a title. It is called the King of Glory. If you want to know where glory is, it's not in triumphalism and power. That's where glory is. That's where glory is. He loves us so much. All your anxiety, all your care.